Hi there and welcome to this video on the Zhiyun Crane 2 handheld gimbal stabilizer. In this video today I'll be going over my thoughts and opinions on using the Crane 2. I'll also specifically be comparing it to the original Zhiyun Crane, which I've been a long time user and a big fan of. And then also I'll be going over how to balance and set up and use the Zhiyun Crane 2 as a stabilizer. So starting out with the Crane 2, it comes in this nice hard shelled carry case. It's quite a lot larger than the original Zhiyun Crane, but that's because it's a bigger stabilizer and can hold a larger payload. Inside the case, you get the actual crane. And what's actually really nice about the Crane 2 is that it fits inside the case pretty much all complete as a unit. The original Zhiyun Crane 1 actually came in pieces and meant that you had to assemble it with the grip, and it just took that extra little bit of time. So the trade-off is that there's a bigger case, but the crane does actually come pre-assembled and ready to go. You get a mini tripod, and I believe these come as standard now in the kits. They didn't necessarily with the Crane 1. These are really handy because you can use them to attached to the bottom of the Crane 2, which has a 1/4-20 attachment, and this makes actually balancing and setting up the gimbal really easy. So once that's screwed on, you can then place the gimbal on a flat surface and it's ready to attach your camera and begin balancing. What you also get in the carry case is charger, and then you also get a little box which contains various different connectors for different makes of cameras. And what the Crane 2 allows you to do is connect your camera, and various different models. So Canon, for example, can take advantage of the follow focus unit that comes with the Crane 2, and also the display on the back of the Crane 2 with a multi-function wheel which allows you to control things like shutter speed, ISO. Now this is only on Canon cameras at the moment. Panasonic, Sony cameras don't have the ability to control the camera from the crane. You do have the ability to start and stop recording on Sony and Panasonic cameras, but that's about it, unfortunately. And this is due to a limitation of the cameras being controlled over USB rather than the crane. So there's not much Zhiyun can do about that. It really is down to the manufacturers. There may be firmware updates that allows the control over them, but I don't necessarily hold my breath for that. So we shall see. So the Crane 2 has a quick release Manfrotto plate, which is really handy. They're fairly kind of standard on the sort of indie video scene. Lots of people have these, and being able to have one of these on the crane just means swapping a camera from a tripod onto the crane and back again is nice and quick. So once the camera is on the gimbal, what we want to do is remove the lens cap. We want to make sure the camera's on, and then we can go about balancing it. What we firstly want to do is point the camera vertically upwards and then release the thumb screw that's here on the side. And then we just want to move the camera back and forth until it will stay pointed directly upwards. We want to tighten that thumb screw, and when it points directly downwards, it should remain in that position as well. The next thing what we want to do is just release the thumb screw that is on the quick release plate, and then we want to slide the camera back and forth until it will remain completely horizontal, and that's pretty good there. So I'll go ahead and tighten up the thumb screw that holds the quick release plate. Next thing we want to do is balance the camera in its roll axis. So we want to get it horizontal, and we do that by releasing the thumb screw at the back of the gimbal, and then we just push the arm until we can get the camera nice and horizontal. And that's pretty good right there. So I'll go ahead and tighten that one up. So the final axis to balance is this one here, and we just loosen the thumb screw once again. We want to just tilt the gimbal on its side, and then depending on whether the camera rolls back or points down, we just want to move this arm in and out, and that's actually pretty good there. So I'll just tighten that one up. And our gimbal is fully balanced. We can now go ahead and actually turn the unit on. And now I have my unit nice and stable and I'm ready to film with. So the gimbal has various different modes. The default one is the pan follow mode. So as I move the gimbal, you see that it pans with me, but the tilt axis is locked, so it remains pointing forwards, doesn't tilt up or down. So I have a multi-selector switch here on the side and I can cycle through. I can now move into locked mode, which means the gimbal always points in the same direction. So if I move the handle, you can see it's always pointing in that direction. And what I can do is control it with the thumbstick and actually move the gimbal round however I like, and tilt it up and tilt it down. The lock mode's really good for moving in and out or doing crane shots because the gimbal always stays fixed in the position that you've set it in. The final mode, if you double click the mode button, is that it will move it into follow mode and then the gimbal will follow your movement. So if you move it down, it tilts down. If you pan it, it follows your pans. Don't tend to use this mode particularly often, but if you're trying to track a subject that's moving around in lots of different orientations, then it can be quite useful. Now with the camera fully set up, if you want to take advantage of the controls within the actual unit and control things like your shutter speed, ISO, once again, only for Canon cameras, you'll need to connect it with a little supplied cable. What you'll need to do is then go into the menu on the Crane and make sure that the correct model of camera is selected. On the Canon cameras, it works really well actually. I was quite surprised. I wasn't expecting the follow focus to be particularly good. And to be honest, I probably wouldn't use it for racking focus while filming because, and this isn't a limitation of the Crane, it's a limitation of the lenses that you use, is that it's an electronic control and it uses the motors. And so you tend to get quite sort of steppy adjustments. Obviously, depending on what lens you use, some are smoother than others. But certainly in terms of changing focus, so without having to grab the lens and move the camera around, I can quickly just change focus using the focus wheel. That's really handy. And then once again, without having to go onto the camera and press various buttons, being able to control those from the actual unit as well. And the starting and stopping of recording from the Crane as well is a really handy addition. So just comparing the Zhiyun Crane 2 with the original Zhiyun Crane, you can see that set up side by side, they're not actually that physically different in size. The main difference comes with the weight and the actual payload that the Crane 2 can carry, which is up to 3.2 kilograms. The original one was around 1.2 to 1.8. The later firmware allowed a slightly heavier payload of 1.8 kilograms, but it was never really the weight of the payloads, it was more to do with the length of the payloads. And the actual gap between the back of the camera and the back motor meant that you couldn't get the camera further enough back on the original one, often to balance it with those heavier, longer lenses. So a combination like the GH4, GH5 with a Metabones and a Sigma 18 to 35 f1.8 was often a big problem with the original Zhiyun Crane. So overall, the Zhiyun Crane 2, a fantastic unit. Not necessarily an upgrade from the original Zhiyun Crane, but more suitable for those people that are wanting to put heavier payloads, larger camera and lens combinations on and use them on a gimbal. The Zhiyun Crane, the original Zhiyun Crane for me, is still a great unit and I will use it for those smaller setups. It obviously packs down into a smaller setup as well, so when you're traveling super light, that can often be really handy. But the Zhiyun Crane 2, those advantages now being able to take those bigger payloads along with the multifunctional display on the back, the camera controls that allow you to start and stop recording, and obviously on the Canon ones as well, being able to control your shutter speed, your aperture, and even your focus. Really good inclusions. Hopefully this video has been useful. If you're looking to pick up the Zhiyun Crane 2, check the description below for some links. And thanks for watching. I'll see you next time.